Fake Goodwin here, and eventually we will like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff, help promote and rank up my channel. I'm going to be reviewing on American Pickle, on a film starring Seth Rogen, and Seth Rogen, he plays Herschel and Ben Greenbaum, two different characters. And the logline for this one: an immigrant worker at a pickle factory is accidentally preserved for 100 years and wakes up in modern day Brooklyn. That's the IMDb logline. But essentially, the film has Herschel preserved, pickled, if you will, and brought to modern day where he's taken in by his last surviving ancestor. And him and his wife went to America based on the American dream, Herschel to pursue the American dream, and never quite achieved that as he ended up preserved in pickles. And he finds out his last surviving relative hasn't really quite lived up to the legend that he thought his family would become. Um, and I typically break these things into three different acts. The best stuff up front to hook your audience. The second stuff, I expose my bias stuff in my second act of the review in case I have something against the film that may not affect your perspective on it. And the third act, I just talk about the worst stuff about the film. So, the best stuff about this, I can say that Seth Rogen plays two different characters, and he handles it quite well. The Herschel Greenbaum character, the older school character brought back, preserved. He's more favorable because he's much more interesting and has layers and traditions. The film really is a lot about family, religion, and it really highlights the drastic change in culture, the real big change in culture, and in times it kind of pits these two generations against each other, and it shows real life things like cancel culture and a lot of that stuff that's really big on today's. But and while some of that is amusing, and he does do a good job portraying Herschel, and essentially when he's playing Ben, he's kind of just Seth Rogen's usual thing, in which he's just pretty much playing himself. But I mean, there are some humorous jokes in there, but let's move right into my Act 2, my personal bias. I'm not really a fan of Seth Rogen or many of the things he says in real life, but I'm not going to let that affect my view of the film, but I will let you know that up front in case you think that it may affect my view of the film. If you really like Seth Rogen, maybe you might view this film more favorable. But personally, I don't think my perspective of the man himself affects the view of the film. Now, I want to get into the third act where we talk about the worst stuff. And this film, it has a really incredibly interesting concept, and this is based off a short story called entitled Sellout. But the movie essentially like I said, it has an interesting concept and all that, but it just has very poor execution. It is poorly executed. The follow up, I mean, just the concept alone, it's interesting, but there's no follow through with it. It's sloppy, messy, kind of all over the place. It really doesn't know what it wants to be or what it wants to say for itself. It loses sight of. It feels like it loses sight of any real plot, or that it never really had a plot. It just had an interesting concept and struggled to find its footing through the vast majority of the film, as we go from just like random scene to random scene where he's ending up in these places. And the film's very self-aware of itself. Like when it comes to the pickle science to preserve them, it kind of just glosses over that and like, oh, okay. It gives us a kind of overlooked explanation, but it also at several times in the film, for instance, Herschel is brought on this TV show where they're talking to him about about things happening in his life, and he's not really sure how he got there. Neither is the audience, and it's never really explained. It's just he's kind of there, and he's like, I don't really know what's going on here. There are many, many times in the film where it's just like absurd and ridiculous that he's gained such popularity or such attention, and he's kind of in a position where we're never shown how he's got there or anything, and it's just kind of all over the place. The film doesn't really have a strong sense of direction or anything like that, and because of that, it really fails to me. Also, a lot of the jokes and a lot of the comedy and stuff are related to today's culture, cancel culture, Twitter, a lot of that stuff, a lot of the political extremism and all that. And while some of that can be amusing, slightly amusing, or really amusing because it is relatable and it is like today's political climate, but also at the same time, movies are kind of overtly political these days. Of course, this is a product of its time, much like the characters in the films are products of their time, so that can't really be faulted too much. But at the end of the day, it's just a very sloppy, all over the place story that had an interesting concept, and then no idea how to follow that up with a film or execute it properly. They just had a beginning in mind, and just kind of like a blind person felt their way around to discover the rest. And because of it, it results in a really sloppy, average at best film that can be amusing at some points. And you could say that this really shows some range and stuff for Seth Rogen as an actor, but not really much, in my opinion. While he does portray Herschel very well, Ben Greenbaum is essentially just Seth Rogen. And that's pretty much all I can really say about this particular film. It is worth a watch, I guess, but I would say it's only worth a single watch if you have nothing better to watch, because it is kind of dumb and silly at its core. So, I mean, I guess I would give the film a 5 at best. It's an average film, an interesting premise, but poor follow-up on that premise. But that premise is just the start of the movie, and everything else that comes after it is just... it's like they didn't have much in mind, and this is supposed to be based off a story that already exists, so hopefully that story wasn't as sloppy as this movie. Otherwise, I'd question why you would want to make this movie. But 5 out of 10. This is Faye Goodwin here. Eventually, we will like, subscribe, share, comment below. Tell me your favorite moments, least favorite moments. If you haven't seen this film, are you going to check it out? Because it really is like not really something that's a repeat. Something you'll want to repeatedly view, or at least I wouldn't. But that's all I've got to say on this one. Stay awesome. Rock on.